Relax. Okay. Kidding. So last week was Easter Sunday, as Burl was pointing out with the children, and it was April Fool's Day. And it was a pretty big day, and it was a pretty cool day, and a pretty wonderful day. And so today is Low Sunday. This is traditionally the day that no one attends church. I am so glad none of you got the memo. That may be because we no longer send that memo. But traditionally, because there was so much build-up for Easter Sunday, so much leading up to sharing those amazing stories of women going in gloom
I think we've got
to find a dead body, and instead finding nothing. And from that nothing, realizing everything. And so today, Low Sunday, it's kind of like, well, what's left, you know? But of course, what's left is this wonderful story. Now, there are some very ancient traditions in the Christian church, 99% of which we don't follow here, but a few of them we do. One of them is the celebration of Easter. The church has done that longer than we've had any other celebration except worshiping on Sundays. We've been doing that for centuries. Almost, but not quite, 2,000 years. The second oldest tradition is to read the story that Joan just read on this Sunday. Now, part of that, I think, is because it gives us some dates, right? Most biblical stories never give us real dates. This one tells us that the second half of this story happens a week after Easter. So I don't know about you, but I would look at it and go, wow, if we just had Easter, we might as well read a story that actually happened on this day, because we don't really know about most of them. It's an interesting story. It's John's story. Doesn't appear in any of the other Gospels. And for me, it's an amazing story about what Jesus says to all of us in the resurrection. Now, to get at that, let's look at the story. And first of all, just for the record, this is not, absolutely not the story of, I don't even want to say it, doubting Thomas. It isn't, okay? I think we called it that for years so that we could take some of the emphasis off of ourselves and put it on Thomas. It's a story instead about Jesus challenging us 2,000 years later via something that happened then. So the story begins on Easter Sunday. And because John's assuming that we're going to read the whole gospel at once, it doesn't actually say that. But it's Easter Sunday. It's in the evening of Easter Sunday. And so the disciples are doing exactly what we would expect them to do, right? They have heard that Jesus is risen. Various folks have seen that he's not in the tomb. Mary Magdalene and some of the other women have come to tell them that they've actually seen Jesus. Some of them have come to tell them that they've encountered Christ, that Christ has spoken to them. So with all of this good news, they're doing exactly what we would expect them to do. They're hiding in a room with the doors locked. I love that. I love that. As an aside, by the way, this Sunday has also at various times in tradition been known as Holy Humor Sunday. And I think it's because this is a hilarious story, folks. But hilarious stories and the best of jokes usually have a really strong message for us, don't they? So the disciples are hiding out in a room. John tells us it's because they're afraid of the authorities. And often, whenever this comes up in Bible study, whenever it does, someone immediately says, well, I don't blame them, because they could have been attacked, they could have been arrested, they could have been killed. And I go, yeah, but if we're all going to live our Christian faith properly, that should, hopefully not always, but that should often be a potential risk. If these guys really wanted to get out there and tell the good news, they could have done it. It probably wouldn't have gone over very well, I'll grant you. And I'll also be perfectly honest that had I been one of the 12, I probably would have been very much hidden in the room with the doors locked, because I'm a scaredy cat. And many of us are. It's okay. But I love this story. Now, we're reading this story in English. Even if we read it in another modern language, we're reading it translated from Greek, which is what John wrote it in, except Jesus didn't speak Greek. Jesus spoke Aramaic. So when John gives us words in Greek, we have a horrible habit in biblical translation of making them sound churchy and making them sound rather nice and having a wonderful spiritual sense to them. And, you can hardly describe them without lapsing into a little bit of an Anglican priest sort of vein, And John tells us that Jesus arrives and speaks unto them and says, "Peace be with you." Except he probably didn't, okay? And it doesn't even really say that in the Greek. That's our interpretation of it. They're in a locked room, first clue. Jesus appears. I love it. No explanation of how he gets there, but he does. Jesus is right there. And after they've all picked up their jaws off the floor, they're like, I imagine what Jesus says presumably says in Aramaic, that would have been translated in Greek, "Peace be with you," can be translated a whole bunch of ways because it's the normal way that you would greet somebody. And it would work from "greetings to you" to "hey, how's it going?" Covered the gamut. It's very handy. Aramaic's a good language that way. I imagine Jesus arrives, finds the disciples hiding in a locked room, and I'm guessing it's either a "so how's it going?" with a big twinkle in his eye, or even a "it's okay, chill. It's okay." So in response to that, they have some conversation. Now, again, often when we get stories, we get a tidbit, right? We get one little itty-bitty tidbit in this story of conversation. My hunch is Jesus stays there for quite some time, and they probably drank some wine and ate some bread and cheese and talked, and, I'm sure they had questions for Jesus. I'm sure he had lots of things to tell them. But John just gives us one snippet of Jesus' instruction. He says, I want you to leave, basically. I don't want you to stay hiding in a locked room, comfy though it may be. You will run out of food. There is no bathroom here, and it's dark. And I want you to go out. And when you go out, I want you to do something. I want you to forgive people's sins. Now, I don't know about you, and if we were having a church meeting, we would have a massive list of things that Jesus probably should have told us to do. And we would be trying very hard to do them. And, I want 3 of you to go and make sure that the coffee program is set up. I need 2 of you to go and make sure that someone's going to the legislature to speak about that legislation that we don't like. And I need 4 of you to go and do this. And, that he'd have a whole list. And what he says is, I want you to go and forgive people. And I especially love it in the translation that Joan read from. If you forgive people's sins, they're forgiven. If you don't forgive them, what are you going to do with them? So, of course, if we don't forgive people's sins, we carry them around with us. And invariably, they will become a way bigger problem for us than they will ever be for someone else. A lot of psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you that. 12-step programs, of which we have gazillions. One of the key ways in which they work is that a very major component of a 12-step program is recognizing you need to find a way to get forgiveness. You need to forgive yourself, and you need to ask others to do it, because without that, we can't really move forward in life. So of all the things that Jesus says, he says, I want you to go out and forgive people. All the other stuff, you'll figure it out from what we talked about. If you remember my stories, you're going to be all set. But be sure to forgive people. So it would be okay if the story stopped there, but of course it doesn't. It goes on. Now imagine, the scene shifts. Imagine now that you're Thomas, okay? And first of all, to redeem him a little bit, Thomas isn't there when they're all hiding. And so there's a little piece of me that wonders, is it because he wasn't scared? We don't know. We have no idea. But there's a part of me that goes, maybe Thomas actually has more faith than they had, and that embarrasses them. Maybe when they said, we're going to lock the doors, Thomas said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. That would be dumb. That's not what Jesus would do. I'm not going to do it. We have no idea. But in any event, Thomas isn't there. So you're Thomas, you're walking down the street, and some friends come running up to you, and they say, you'll never guess what happened. Jesus showed up the other night. And Thomas is going, Jesus who? You know, Jesus, the one that they killed on Friday. Right. Okay. Are you hearing yourselves? Jesus died on Friday and he showed up on Sunday, huh? Okay. And they say, yeah. And Thomas says, so where were you? And they say, well, we were in a locked room. This is a ludicrous story, you know? It really is. These guys are hiding. And when they try and tell this to Thomas, can you for 1 microsecond blame Thomas for going, with all due respect, guys, it's stupid. I believe it's with a lot of rhetoric that Thomas says, well, with all due respect, you know, I'm happy to believe, but I need a little more evidence. If I could actually, you know, perhaps touch him, see the nail holes, see where that spear went in his side that made us all gasp in horror on Friday. Maybe if I saw some of that, maybe I'd believe, but I'm sorry. Much as we may all want to believe this, guys, I can't do it. This is just ridiculous. I'm sorry. And then the last scene of the story, it's a week later. And obviously they're still getting along well enough that he hasn't completely abandoned them. And so Thomas is with them this time when they're back in the room, and sure enough, they've locked the doors again. Let's just make sure that we're safe. And again, Jesus shows up. Never again does it tell us how he gets in there, because that's not the issue. Let's not get caught up on that one. Jesus shows up, and again, it's okay. It's me, remember? And without Thomas saying anything, Jesus goes up to him and says, Thomas, it really is me. You know, you needed to see me, you needed to touch me, go ahead. It's really me. And then he says the most powerful thing that sadly I think we miss, or sometimes we flip it around. Jesus said, it's so good that you saw me to believe me. And can you imagine the amazing blessings for all those millions of people out there who will believe in me and they'll never see me? And that's where we come in. See, we've never seen Christ alive or dead or risen. And if you're like me, while the stories are powerful and profound, there is a part of me, the very practical part of me, which is not a huge part, frankly, but the practical part of me reads these stories and goes, yeah, I'm having trouble with some of the factual stuff. But they're not about that. Not about that at all. They're about a reality. They're about a reality that the disciples experienced from that moment onwards. They're about the awareness that Christ was with them. Even in a locked space, even when we think we're all alone, that does not stop Christ from coming and being with us. Even when we think we need to be terrified because it's always everybody out to get us, right? It's never 1 or 2 people, it's the whole world. And Christ is there, I'm sure, to say, actually, you know, we can beat him. It's okay. Christ is here. I can tell you from the very depth of my being that I know that Christ is risen. I believe that. I'll also tell you from the depth of my being that I look at these stories and I go, I'm really not 100% sure about this physical resurrection thing because I don't get it. And that does not mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean I think it didn't happen. It means I have questions, but questions are one thing. I'll go with the faith thing here. And the faith thing I have is knowing that in those times when I'm in a locked room for whatever reason, Christ usually comes in anyway with a twinkle in his eye and embraces me and says, we're going to get through this, and I need you to go out and do things for me. I think that's what John wants us to take from this story. And to take it everywhere, every moment of our lives, into everything we do. And proclaim that with our living, that Christ is here. And as we've experienced in our own locked rooms, he's going nowhere. Thanks be to God.